Okay. Hi, everyone. We see lots of people starting to filter in. We're just going to give it a couple minutes to get started. So while everybody is coming in, why don't you let us all know where you're coming from in the chat so we can get to know you all a little bit better? That would be great. Oh, got 88. We've got somebody from Vancouver, Montreal, Vancouver. Oh, wow. Toronto, Winnipeg, Edmonton, Niagara Falls, all so many Canadian friends. Peterborough, Barrie, Colorado. Cool. Wow. Really all over the map. That's very exciting. Okay, we're gonna kick it off. I know people are gonna continue to come in, but I just want to start with saying thank you so much, everyone, for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. My name is Meredith. I am Keelabs Senior Marketing Manager. And before we get started, I just want to start this session today by acknowledging that Keelabs head office in Vancouver is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and give thanks for the generosity and hospitality on these lands and waters. So thank you again so much for taking some time out of your schedules. We also have Kim, Keelabs Partnerships Coordinator, helping us out today. So you might see her in the chat box answering some of your technical questions. So feel free to say hello to Kim. If you are new to Keela, welcome. Keela is a complete nonprofit management software that helps you manage your donors, market your nonprofit, and most importantly, raise more money for your cause. So just before I hand it over to Shireen from Imagine Canada, I just have a couple housekeeping items to go over. So today's session will be about 35-40 minutes in length, followed by a Q&A at the end. So if you submitted questions through the registration, that's great. We will get to as many of those as we can, as well as any questions that come in through the chat. So please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A to submit your questions throughout the presentation, and we will come back at the end to answer them. And then speaking of the chat box, please remember to select everyone when you type so that all of our guests today can read your comments and questions. And finally, I know this was a popular question. So yes, this webinar will be recorded and you will receive access to the recording within the next couple of days. So keep an eye for an email from us. And with all of that out of the way, I'm going to hand it over to Shireen from Imagine Canada.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Shireen from Imagine Canada. It's great to connect with all of you. As we're going to be talking about fundraising trends today, I just wanted to quickly talk about Grant Connect, which could be a really helpful resource for a lot of you. We're a Canadian fundraising research platform, and housing all kinds of funding opportunities, institutional funding opportunities, that would help your organization find the best funding opportunities for your organization and your needs. So we've got over 11,400 Canadian foundations, 500 plus corporate giving programs, 500 plus government grant programs, 80 plus American funders that also give to Canadian organizations, and 250 plus other grant opportunities from other nonprofits and charities. And the platform gives you all kinds of different features that can really help you optimize your fundraising efforts and really help you save time. You can use a lot of different filters and criteria to find the best funding opportunities. There's all kinds of data insights, giving history in funder profiles, as well as program info, etc. Gift Explorer, which helps you look through gift data as well, meaning you can search for funders that have given to specific organizations. Contact Explorer that can help you leverage your network as well, looking for names of people who are associated with funders, and of course our pipeline, which is actually the image that's shown on the slide as well. It just helps you stay organized and manage your workflow too. And if you are interested in learning more about Grant Connect, you should definitely contact me, ckwon@imaginecanada.ca, because Grant Connect's got the best data from the research that we do at Imagine Canada, ourselves, and you'd always be connected with one of us if you need any support as well. And because we're also a charity, as many of you may already know, we also, it's also part of our mission to provide affordable pricing. So if you go onto our website and check the different pricing tiers, you'll notice that we'll have different pricing tiers for organizations depending on your size as well. So definitely check that out, or just get in touch if you have any questions on that. So thanks so much. I'm just going to hand it over to Michelle O'Keery of O'Keery and Associates.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hello, and thank you to everyone for joining us for the Fundraising Trends 2023 webinar sponsored by Keela and Imagine Canada's Grant Connect. My name is Michelle O'Keery, and I'm a certified fundraising executive who spent my entire career in the charitable sector. I've held pretty much every role from entry-level communications and community engagement coordinator to major gifts fundraiser to CEO. I recently left my role as the CEO of Compassion House Foundation here in Edmonton to grow my consulting practice and expand the nonprofit that I co-founded alongside my husband and another couple. Additionally, as a volunteer, I'm vice chair of PolicyWise for Children and Families and lead the Reconciliation Committee for the YWCA Edmonton. Like many of you, I have spent the past 3 years adapting to the constant policy changes, public health measures, funding criteria, and talent shortages. It has been a grind. And while many nonprofits have begun to recover since the pandemic, the world is preparing for another tumultuous year. Rising inflation and interest rates, skyrocketing fuel costs, and a worldwide cost of living crisis will all have an impact on nonprofits' abilities to raise funds this year. To launch strong in 2023, nonprofits must face the coming year's challenges head-on and learn the strategies and behaviors that will allow them to cultivate strong donor relationships, retain existing donors, and attain new donors under difficult circumstances. So today we're going to talk about 8 fundraising trends and 1 emerging trend that I'd like to touch on. The first is personalized outreach. Like many of us know, no donor likes a generic thank you email, or worse, a bland and impersonal request for a donation. Fundraisers have increasingly understood this and have taken great strides to make sure that their teams are equipped with the right information needed to make all their donor communications both personal and meaningful. In practice, this means not only maintaining an up-to-date and relevant donor database, but also using the information it contains to extract those relevant details and create personalized communications and requests. With more and more people tightening their belts in these very precarious times, personalized outreach is more important than ever before, but it's also one of the most time-consuming and difficult jobs on a fundraiser's plate. Fortunately, AI-enabled fundraising software like Keelabs can alleviate some of these pressures by cutting out much of the grunt work that's involved in personalized outreach. Fundraising trend number 2, donor retention. Donor retention will be critical to keeping cash flow strong this year. It's easier and cheaper to build on past successes by maintaining good relationships with existing donors than to keep launching entirely new campaigns. Donor acquisition is an expensive endeavor. With approximately 70% of donors only giving to an organization once, nonprofits are often left with a loss on their initial investment in first-time donors. However, it's much easier and more cost-effective to motivate individuals to give who have already done so in the past. Additionally, fundraising technology is making it easier than ever to optimize stewardship techniques and improve donor experiences. To succeed at donor retention, you need a strategy as well as a way to measure your success. Tracking donor retention will allow you to identify how well you're succeeding in this, identifying any lulls in donations, and making necessary adjustments to restore giving to its former levels. AI-based fundraising tools can help you track all of this important information. Fundraising trend number 3, recurring gift programs. Monthly giving programs provide nonprofits with predictable and sustainable revenue while reducing the need for fundraisers to keep making individual appeals. Even better, monthly giving is becoming increasingly popular among young donors. Because recurring giving is more financially impactful and easier to manage, Fundraisers need to make it a priority in 2023. Additionally, monthly giving is a great way to connect with the next generation of donors. For example, a study found that 60% of millennials are interested in monthly giving and 45% of them have already given online. I suggest developing a compelling campaign around monthly giving and garnering initial support first. Your staff, board of directors, and volunteers are a great start and can provide heartfelt testimonials on why they give in this way. From there, tap into those individuals who give once or twice a year consistently. Next, the all-important in-person events. I know organizations are very excited to return to in-person. But since their post-pandemic return to reality, people have been thirsting for these events where they can meet and mingle in the flesh. That said, behavioral changes triggered by the pandemic are certainly lingering. Over the last few years, most people have been forced online, at least in some situations, and have begun to appreciate the speed, ease, and convenience of online events. In 2023, the best approach will be to cover all of your bases. Offer a range of online, in-person, and hybrid events to make sure you cater to each segment of your donor base. A one-night event can now become a week-long campaign with ways to engage and give online and in person. To boost engagement of your new and improved events, reach your donor base in a personal and meaningful way. Your donors are flooded every day with solicitations to donate and participates in organizations' missions. Make your organization stand out with custom and personalized messages like video to steward, invite, and thank donors when it matters the most. Now, I've actually seen this in a couple of different ways that I've been really impressed with. A lot of people think about hybrid events as just having it be a virtual way to tap into the event. But I think with the opportunity to leverage campaigns online, I actually saw the YWCA Edmonton do this. What used to be a one-day breakfast for the Rose campaign actually became a 10-day long campaign that they used to both educate the public, garner awareness, and receive additional support through donations. Next, fundraising trend number 5 is around trust-based philanthropy. During times of uncertainty, people are naturally more risk averse. To retain donors and attract new ones in 2023, you will have to focus intensely on building trust with your donors and constituents. The core of trust-based philanthropy is relationship building. Just like with any other relationship, nonprofits will have to work hard at open and honest communication, listening and learning about their donors, and being responsive at all times. It's also particularly important to be transparent about the use of funds and to be ready to promptly share any information that donors ask for. Fundraising software will help keep staff up with many of the actions that help to build trust, including thanking donors, sharing impact stories, asking donors for feedback, and remembering donors' birthdays and anniversaries. Fundraising trend number 6, fundraising technology. I've talked about it a lot already, but with a looming recession and massive staffing shortages across all industries, you might have to make do with small but dedicated staff that you already have. While your staff members are likely to be stressed and time crunched under the current conditions, there are tools that can alleviate their daily burdens. Fundraising tools like Keelabs and Imagine Canada's Grant Connect cut out some of the most laborious prospect research, cultivation, and stewardship activities, enabling them to achieve so much more with their time. For example, as mentioned earlier, Grant Connect provides comprehensive data management that's managed by expert fundraisers who know exactly what you need. You'll know what to ask for, how much to ask for, and even how to position your ask for success. These functions can cut down on hours of research time in a fundraiser's day. And I know, as a fundraiser myself, that's probably my least favorite part of the job. Getting your fundraisers out and connecting with your constituents is so much more important. And so where you can leverage technology, it's going to be hugely important this year. Next, flexible giving. If one word can define what will help organizations survive in 2023, it's flexibility. Nonprofits will need to be inventive and find new and diverse ways to raise funds, rather than simply relying on tried and tested methods that may no longer be effective. think the one thing that is surprising in this post-pandemic world is how much the world has shifted on us. Donor activities, engagement, everything looks a little bit different as we return to the world in the post-pandemic environment. We've already discussed a lot of this in the context of planning a range of online and in-person events, but creativity must also be applied when deciding on the types of events to offer. Think about what your audience needs today and dream up new offerings to try and keep them engaged. Another area in which flexibility is important is that of payments. Online giving grew by 12.1% in 2021 over the previous year, showing that how well people adjusted to the changing environment due to COVID. And while mailing a donation slip might have worked in the past, today's audiences want the convenience of paying for a donation pretty much any way they choose. An interesting stat is that 47% of donors over the age of 60 are giving online. I thought that was really interesting. I think a lot of times when we've talked about our elderly donors, those in rural and remote communities, we thought that this might not be a way that they can give, but people have really come around to it. Another benefit of adding flexible giving options to your fundraising strategy is that you can entice donors to give more and potentially reach new audiences. For example, nonprofit text messaging audiences grew by 26% in 2020. Similarly, mobile giving donations have increased by 205%. Those are pretty jarring statistics. The key in 2023 is to make it easy for donors to donate in a range of ways, especially via mobile devices and on the fly. Offer a wide range of payment methods, including those from digital wallets, peer-to-peer, and online transaction portals such as PayPal, Apple Pay, Google Pay, Venmo, and Facebook. QR codes can also help to this end. And wow, what a remarkable comeback QR codes had during COVID. And fundraising trend number 8, the last one I'm going to touch on today before getting into an emerging trend, is social media. Here's an interesting and intriguing stat. Projections for social media use estimates that average an adult will spend 6 years and 8 months of their life on social media. That is wild. It is a fact of life that charities, regardless of shape and size, need to have some sort of social media presence. Focus on the right platforms, and that means thinking about who you want to engage with, the demographics that you want to reach, the people you want to convert into donors. You need to pick the platform that best suits the above criteria. Do your research and find out about the demographics that you want to reach. Consider the following information. Gen Z makes up 60% of TikTok user base. 90% of Gen Z have used Snapchat, and the use of Facebook declines year over year among Gen Z. Pick the best platform for your needs, then work around the rules of that platform. Each platform has official rules that you need to follow. You need to familiarize yourself with the rules simply to understand how the platform works, and importantly, work out the unwritten rules and trends. And this is constantly changing. I don't know if anyone is trying to beat these algorithms lately, but it is hard work. That means thinking about some or perhaps all of the following questions. How many posts should you do per day? What are the best times to post your content? What content might be most effective on that site? Are you going to use images, GIFs, videos, memes? And should you engage with digital partners? It's a lot of things to consider. Last, I want to touch on an emerging trend. A lot of this has been conversation around the impact of the pandemic and a lot of the changes that have happened. But another thing that happened during the pandemic was the murder of George Floyd, which brought about a global conversation about equity and social justice. Here in Canada, the uncovering of unmarked graves at residential schools shook us to our core. Most of us have taken time to listen and learn. Organizations have made grand statements about how we plan to do better moving forward. We've developed EDI strategies and reconciliation action plans, but what does that mean in the context of fundraising? Well, community-centric fundraising is a fundraising model that's grounded in equity and social justice. The focus is on reimagining fundraising and prioritizing communities. And while we've spent a lot of this session focused on how to stand out and win over donors, I think it's important that we ensure the community we serve and benefit from is centered in our work. Community-centric fundraising is gaining steam, and I do encourage everyone to go to communitycentricfundraising.org to learn more about this. Now, I got through that very quickly, which is very exciting because I know that there were a lot of questions that were posted early when people registered, and I see a lot of action happening in the chat and the Q&A. So that leaves a lot of time for us to get into that, and we have both myself as well as the Keela and Imagine Canada Grant Connect team here to answer any questions that you might have.
Amazing. Thank you, Michelle. I always love when we have lots of time for questions at the end, because you're right, we did get quite a few in and they keep coming in. So let's start with maybe a question from Audrey, who's out there today. So she's asking, what kinds of methods are used to extend key fundraising events? So what can you, when you're looking at your events, what kind of methods can you use to maybe grow it?
Sorry, extend
key fundraising events.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, like I mentioned earlier, that opportunity to really develop a whole campaign around an event rather than just have it be that one-off day where people come in and it's only those who are physically at the event can participate in. You have the opportunity to leverage social media, your website, and other tools, earned media obviously being a significant one. And when I was actually at Compassion House Foundation, we were based here in Edmonton, but we served a rural population. And so we had to always think about, how do we reach the people that we serve? Because we were hosting events, fundraising events here in Edmonton, but the people that we serve and who benefited from the services that we provide weren't really able to engage or attend. And so for us, we did leverage virtual. The pandemic was a good opportunity to play around with that and having virtual or hybrid events, but then looking at how do you do targeted communications out into those communities as well. And so we were really proactive at looking at, when we were telling stories, how were we then targeting the community that that individual was from to help them understand the impact of their gift to our organization in that kind of local touch point.
Amazing. Okay, our next question is, what is the best place to start as a small nonprofit with no fund development program and limited resources?
Good thing that you have Imagine Canada's Grant Connect on, because I will say there are a lot of grants out in the ecosystem right now. I've been working with a lot of relatively new or small organizations who are in exactly that space, and grants are the low-hanging fruit. There's a lot available right now, and I think one that I'd like to draw your attention to is the federal government recently announced $400 million investment into the Community Services Recovery Plan, and that is being distributed. There's a grant that's being distributed out through 3 organizations, one being Community Foundations of Canada, the second being United Way Centraid, and the third, the Canadian Red Cross. And so they're in every single community across Canada. So no matter where you are, if you're rural and remote or in a big city, you will have access to that. And grants are anywhere between $10,000 upwards of $200,000. So if you're in a position that you're needing to create some infrastructure, maybe it's a fund development strategy, you need to hire some folks or retain your existing team, there's different focus areas for each of the organizations that are granting those funds out, and they are prioritizing small organizations.
Mm-hmm. And we have you.
Sorry,
oh, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, sorry, just wanted to jump in on the Community Services Recovery Fund, because we've been, coordinating with some of the partners on that fund. It's a really great opportunity for organizations of all sizes, like Michelle said, and in particular, the fund is available for both local organizations as well as national organizations. So for one of the first times, they have opened up a national stream for organizations that are working either provincially or nationally, delivering their programs across Canada. And the fund, like Michelle said, does have availability up to $200,000 in terms of a one-year request. And the really interesting part of the fund this year is they do have opportunities for investments in both people as well as systems. So if you're looking for digital infrastructure or staffing needs, it's a really great opportunity that doesn't really come around too often for those types of funding needs. So definitely encourage you to check it out. And I dropped the link in the chat just a couple of minutes ago.
And I do want to just add to that they're also granting out to non-qualified donees. So if you've ever tried to work with a community foundation in the past, you generally have to be a registered charity, or you have to have someone who will act as that flow through for you. This is the first time that community foundations are donating directly to nonprofits. So you don't have to have registered charity status. So that really opens it up to a lot of folks, especially those smaller organizations who maybe previously weren't able to tap into funding.
Amazing. And I was also just going to add, we with Imagine Canada have actually built a ton of resources around supporting the grant application process, how to, from A to Z, what to do. So feel free to hop on our website and we can include some of our links to those resources as well in the follow-up emails so that you all have access to those. I think that actually kind of dovetails into this next question quite nicely. So what is the most important first step for an organization without a major gifts department? So this is one that has historically focused on grants or small annual campaigns. And what's the next step that they could take?
So looking at developing a major gifts program. Is that correct?
Or for organizations that don't have a major gifts program. So they've been relying just on grants and now they're kind of ready for whatever that next step is.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the big thing is getting clear on what your funding priorities are first and foremost. So really understanding where you need to bring funds in, how much, and creating a direct line of sight for donors into the impact of the work that you're doing. So developing a case for support is going to be absolutely critical. And then prospect research. So prospect research is everything. If you have limited capacity, you want to spend your time where it's going to be the most fruitful, where you're going to have the largest ROI. If you're just, sending your fundraisers into the wilderness and hoping that they come back with something, you're not likely to be very successful. So you want to have a strong strategy around it, an awesome case for support, and develop the infrastructure around it. If you've only been doing grants in the past, and now you're trying to bring on major gifts, you have to have a really strong stewardship plan as well. People think, you got to get the prospect research, donor cultivation, the ask, and then they fall off at the stewardship side of things. And if someone's giving a major gift to your organization, there's a very good chance that they will give that major gift again, when they will open up their networks to you and connect you with other folks who can also give a major gift. And so I think just really making sure that you don't forget about that stewardship side of things as you progress through the donor cultivation cycle.
Awesome. We have somebody who is wondering if you can give a little bit more clarity around what trust-based philanthropy is.
Yeah, so I think about trust-based philanthropy, it's really about that open and honest communication about how funds are spent within your organization. And I don't mean, I think a lot of people think, oh, when you were talking about how funds are spent, now we're going to get into fundraising ratios and things like that. That's not what I mean. I mean regularly communicating with your donors. What is your communications plan? What is your stewardship plan? Do you have regular touch points with that donor? Do they understand the work that you're doing? Can you go back to them and say, we tried this and you know what, it actually wasn't successful? And I think that is when you really get to a great place with your donors. And actually I was chatting with one of the local community foundations who said that's really what they're trying to practice and create, even with the nonprofits that they work with and they grant out to, that they want them to come back and say, you know what, we weren't successful in this, but this is what we learned through that process. And this is how we're going to shift and change moving forward. I think when you create that trust with your donors, what happens is that you're actually given permission to fail. And I don't think that that's something that a lot of times we have in our sector, that we're constantly so afraid to mess up or to do something that's going to, maybe have our grant, evaluation or report back not look as successful as we had intended. But I think when you have open conversations about it, businesses are allowed to fail. They try and fail all the time, but I feel like we're not given that because we're dealing with donor funds. I do believe that you can get there with your donors. It just takes a lot of relationship building, a lot of transparency transparency and really bring them along on that journey. And you'll find that people are quite understanding and really willing to reinvest in an organization when they have that trust.
Amazing. Yeah, exactly. That's perfect. Okay, so let's see here. So you have mentioned tech options. You mentioned technology a couple times. So we've gotten a few questions around that. So do you have any, this question says, with technology and convenience taking priority, where do privacy and ethics fit into the big picture?
Yeah, so you obviously want to make sure that anything that you're using has solid, why am I struggling with the word, like privacy pieces in place, and any software that you are getting generally should have a strong position, cloud-based, et cetera, that dual authorization to get in and access. I don't think you want to have every single person within your organization accessing donor information, but you do need to have, your fundraisers able to access that. And I think also just being very clear about what information you gather and what information you don't. Is it relevant to them as a donor within your organization? Would you be comfortable if the information that you logged about your recent meeting or conversation with them was to get out? If you weren't comfortable with that, maybe those are details you wouldn't want to include. And so I think being really mindful of that, you may develop very close relationships with donors. They may share things with you along the way that are personal and private. You have to be pretty discerning about what you're putting into your software and how you're going to leverage that, because I know that we see this in the sector all the time. People move on, right? And so you might not always be the one managing that relationship or that information within the software either. So I think it's really being careful and really clear up front about what information about donors you do collect and how it's protected. And then also being able to share that with donors who may have concerns about privacy as well. So if they know what your privacy policy is, confidentiality policy within your organization, that's going to really help to assure them that important information about them isn't getting out. And there are a lot of donors, especially major donors, who don't necessarily want to be recognized publicly either. So really ensuring that you have a policy or a process around that to ensure that you don't accidentally post it in your annual report or something like that if it's not something that a donor has authorized.
Yes, for sure. And, shouting that privacy policy, not necessarily from the rooftops, but definitely having it accessible is huge. So you mentioned hybrid events, you talked about your experience with hybrid events. We have a question here that says, are, online only events still relevant in a post-pandemic world, or kind of the world that we're living in now, where things are opening up again and we're able to have those in-person events? Do those online events still have a place here?
You guys were at one, which is great, right? It shows that people will register and come to these. And I think, the team at Keela and Imagine Canada actually let me know before this that this is the most people they've ever had signed up for one of these webinars, which the appetite's still there, which is really exciting, because it means that you can meet people where they're at. Again, I think it depends on your organization and specifically where your constituents, stakeholders are. But if you're, again, like the organization I worked for, if you're located in a large center, but you serve rural and remote community, physically being able to get to all of those communities might be challenging. So looking at how you can host online events, and sometimes the experience is actually better if it's just online or just in person, rather than trying to do the hybrid thing, because the technology is just, it's not totally there for hybrid. You do your best, but you're obviously tailoring it to the in-person crowd, and then the hybrid folks are getting a totally different experience. And so I think online events are still very much there, but you don't want to do a 4-hour hybrid event. Lunch and learns are a great opportunity, to have somebody come in and share their story, things like that. But keep them tight. Something like this that's about an hour long is usually going to be quite successful.
For sure. So you mentioned the recession. We did get a couple questions come in about the recession. So this is a question from Elaine. It says, as you pointed out, especially with the recession, team sizes are getting smaller and most small charities are short-staffed and don't have dedicated fundraising staff. What are your top 2 areas? And I know you mentioned grants already, which is great. But what top 2 areas do you recommend prioritizing for fundraising for small teams who are juggling many roles?
Yeah, it's tough. And again, I've worked with a lot of these organizations. I do think the low-hanging fruit where you're just going to get a high ROI is in the grant space right now. But beyond that, you can't not be out there in the community. You need to be touching people. So you need to have someone who's focused on campaigns, whether that's, your annual campaigns. If you have, I think we talked a little bit about monthly giving. If you can get people to sign on around monthly giving, it gives you some level of consistency and predictability. But you are going to have to make some tough decisions around that. I'm a big proponent of major gifts, but I also understand that the ROI is generally a little bit down the road. And so it is an upfront investment. It's going to take 12, 18, 24 months before you see the fruits of that labor. Unfortunately, that means a lot of times those are the first people to go. But again, I think about my experience. I started at Compassion House Foundation in 2019, slowly started to build rapport with our donors. And in the summer of 2022, we had the largest individual major gift ever made to the organization in its entire history. And so that takes time, but it's definitely a worthwhile investment. And so where you can tap into, coming back to the grant side of things, grants that are going to help on maintaining your staff or being able to hire and leverage, I would look at that. And again, I think that one's out through the Canadian Red Cross that's focused on staffing. But to be able to keep that focus, I think is incredibly important, and not losing track of kind of the long-term impact on your organization if you don't invest now.
Yes, for sure. And you just mentioned campaigns, and you've mentioned kind of millennials and those kinds of things a couple times, but I imagine a lot of these nonprofits still have quite a large audience of donors who aren't quite as digitally sophisticated as maybe some others. So we did get a question come in that says, how do you encourage non-digital users to engage in those digital campaigns that we're running? Like, how can we kind of bring them into where things are at now?
Yeah, I think while some folks may not be, active on social media, and I'm remiss to say I did not include this, but I should have, our, e-newsletters or electronic, like utilizing email for donations is still highly, highly, highly effective. One of the most effective tools out there. And so obviously you need to get people into your database in order to do that. But I would be shocked if the overwhelming majority of your elderly donors did not have an email account that they regularly use. So being able to capture them there and then push them to, if you have a video that's linked on YouTube or something like that, that will go a long way. Obviously, if there's some people who just do not have access to the technology or internet, you might have to look at how you find them on different platforms. And there are still people who prefer that you give them a call or that you do send that physical appeal to them. And I think just making sure that you've really accurately captured that within your database so that when you can pull that information. I know, there are still the donors who want the physical annual report every year. Most of us have kind of moved more digital and away from that physical copy, but some organizations may still get about 100 of them that are physical, so that they can send them out to those donors too. That's really important too. So really knowing your donors and then having a strategy around how you reach them on various platforms is important. And again, that's where it comes back to how do you leverage fundraising technology, your donor database, how are you collecting information? But I really don't think that there's a ton of those donors who are completely off the grid and not connecting at minimum through email.
It's also, everybody's thinking about a recession and cost saving measures, and that is a cost saving measures, right? Cutting down on that cost of direct mail by just understanding who your donors are could be a huge cost savings for you. Okay, so what types of donations, kind of looking at the trends coming into 2023 and beyond, what types of donations do you think will be the most impacted in 2023 by a recession? Is it going to be individual giving, corporate giving, foundations?
Yeah, I think we're going to see it on the individual giving, and specifically in those kind of small to medium-sized gifts, right? So it's those people who are going to be most hard hit. And we saw this at the beginning of the 2020 pandemic as well. It shrunk our donor base. So, and we've always seen this, right? Where we have the majority of our money is coming from those top tier donors, but we were kind of bolstered by, you had that consistency of those smaller ones. And I think what we're going to see is those people who are at that kind of middle class or middle income level are going to really feel the brunt of this. And unfortunately, they're going to have to make some really tough decisions. And it's pretty easy to say, well, if I have to get groceries or gas or give a donation, where do I have to cut back? So I do anticipate that's where it's going to come and hit us the hardest. We may also see it from foundations who don't, like, especially the larger ones who, community foundation, for example, that's pushing the interest on their investments earned out. Those investments have not been doing well. And I have no doubt that that's going to have an impact as well.
And then I know, thinking about the recession, donor retention is obviously top of mind for a lot of people. We all know the cost to retain is much cheaper than the cost to acquire new. So do you have any kind of examples from your professional work of things that you have done to increase donor retention or at least support donor retention?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, again, coming back to donor stewardship, this is absolutely critical. It's not a capture and release. We want to keep those people engaged in our work. So understanding our donor, ask the question, what drove them to give, especially those who have given their first gift, what drove them to give that first gift? Why are they engaged in our cause? Why is it meaningful to them? And that will help to really open doors to help understand how you want to touch base with them, how you want to engage them. They might be somebody who has personally been impacted by the work that you do. And that person might be great to get involved on a committee. Maybe you have an upcoming event, an opportunity to come and volunteer in the work and give back in that way, so they can then share it out into their networks as well. But they remain really engaged in the cause. There are others, like your corporate donors, that they might have other reasons for giving. I can think of several of mine who it was really around our connection to other large corporations. For example, from a sponsorship standpoint, our presenting sponsor for our annual event, when we got them, a lot of our other sponsors kind of fell in line because they were kind of that big one, and the rest were clients of theirs or did some sort of work with them, or they were a client of theirs. So that's what drew them in. So having those honest and transparent conversations about why people engage with your cause, and then creating a customized stewardship plan for them that ensures that they stay engaged on an ongoing basis. And now that might not be realistic for every single donor. The person who gives $100 once a year, you might not, depending on the size of your organization, be able to create, a really customized stewardship plan for them. But you should have a stewardship plan for all of your donors. Once they're in your system, when are they receiving updates from you? Do they get your annual report? Do they get an invite to your AGM? Do they get an e-newsletter? Some of those pieces, just to keep them engaged on an ongoing basis.
Yes, for sure. And such like a tie in to all of the tech and the digital stuff, and finding some of those tools that can support that work. We got a really great question from Lisa. She's asking if you can expand on the emerging community-centric fundraising trend, and what should this look like when embedded into a fundraising strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm personally quite invested in this. The nonprofit that my husband and I and another couple started that I had mentioned earlier is actually focused on equity, diversity, and inclusion, specifically working with BIPOC youth. And we've done a couple of presentations at the Association of Fundraising Professionals in Toronto for annual conference. And to me, what community-centric fundraising is about is really moving away from all the donor centricity that we've been talking about for a very long time. And I know it's still very much the focus of this conversation here today, and looking at how do we center the community? How do we center those that we serve and ensure that their voices are heard? How do we work collaboratively with other organizations rather than always being at odds with one another? I think we have to ask ourselves hard questions about scope creep, and are we the best person to be delivering that service, or is someone else already doing it and we can better collaborate with them rather than having to just continuously get larger and larger? Asking questions like, who is the protagonist in the stories that we tell? Is it the individuals that we serve, or is it the donor, and why, right? So there's a lot of questions that we have to start to ask as an industry, I believe, in order to ensure that we are not creating more harm. I think there's a lot of well-intentioned people who create harm in the communications, in the way that they engage with those that they serve. And it's really about being quite mindful about that. And so I have an entire presentation on this that I'm happy to share with anyone. I think some folks did sign up for my newsletter, so I can include that in there. But you can go on to the communitycentricfundraising.com or .org, I apologize. They have some really incredible resources there that can help you get started. And I'm also a resource if anyone's interested in exploring that further. But it's a hard conversation because it's a really big transition from the way that we've done things. But I think one that is a worthwhile conversation is especially as we kind of look at the backdrop of the last several years and the conversations that we're having and the communities that we serve. So it's really about asking if we're living our values within the sector as well.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, I mean, it's a trend, obviously. So you put it in your presentation, and we're going to see it in 2023, but I think it's going to be a huge part of 2023, which is good, which is a good way for us to be going. So we received a question before in advance that says, what would you say is a commonly overlooked or ignored fundraising tool or tactic or process that you believe every single nonprofit needs to be using in 2023?
Darn, that one's good.
It's a loaded question.
It is. I think I might need a second to think about that one. Overlooked. Can I think about that one and we come back to it? Because I don't want to not answer it, but I also want to take some time.
Yeah, for sure. We can move to this next one here that's come in while you were giving your presentation here. So can you address the challenge of trying to engage with prospects and donors and not always getting a response, and what kind of pace and how should you continue to follow up to secure the gift rather than lose the gift?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think oftentimes we start to get a little bit squirrely when someone doesn't get back to us right away, but just because they're not extremely responsive at the moment doesn't mean that we've totally lost them. I think it's a bit of managing our own expectations in that and creating a bit of a timeline up front with them so that we know what to expect as well, and asking them, just being really honest in those initial conversations about making the gift, about what their timelines are, how they would like you to follow up, because some folks, especially those who are able to give those large major gifts, their lives are quite busy and things happen, and you might feel like, well, this was the timeline I had and I thought the gift was going to be here, but that might not be the case. And I can give actually a good example around this. The major gift that I talked about earlier, the largest in our organization's history, the conversation around that started in March of 2022. There was a commitment made in April, a couple of follow-up meetings, felt like things were really good. I sent the initial gift agreement, I think, at the end of April. Followed up in May. I followed up again in June. And then, finally I was able to get this guy down and have a conversation with him. And it had just been that life got really busy. He was traveling a lot, work things happened. It wasn't a lack of interest or intent to follow through, just a whole bunch of things happened. And so we had to connect. We got a date for the announcement. And once we had that in place, we were running. And so, again, I think as much transparency up front and really setting expectations is important, especially once you've had that conversation about the gift. And then if you're looking at more in the prospect side of things where you haven't had that conversation about the gift that they intend to make is, how do you utilize maybe other touch points? Sometimes, and I've been there, I remember being a major gifts manager, and I was not the most important person in the organization. People didn't always care about getting back to me. But when I could maybe pull in someone from my major gifts committee or, who was a peer of theirs or my CEO or a board member in order to be that kind of warm handoff or follow up, that goes a long way as well. And so it's just really knowing who's the best person to do that follow up that's going to kind of get the ball rolling.
Mm-hmm. And that really segues into another question that we got, and then maybe we'll come back to the one about what should people start doing if you're ready. If not, we've got a few more that we can cover. But how do you, so you've talked about a committee, how do you see kind of collaboration and partnerships? How can that support fundraising moving into 2023?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think now more than ever, especially when you look at grants and corporate donors, they want to know how you're collaborating with other organizations. And in fact, a lot of government granting organizations have kind of changed the way they do it, and they won't even look at you unless you're part of kind of a collaborative. And so I think that's a good move. It's really incentivizing it through the money, that you're working collaboratively with other agencies. But there's also opportunities. Again, I go back to my time at Compassion House Foundation. There's an organization here in Edmonton called Wellspring. Well, they do very similar work. We provided a safe and comfortable place for people to stay during cancer treatment when they had to travel. Wellspring offered post-treatment or during cancer and post-treatment support services. And so for us, we had that conversation open regularly, making sure that anytime we were looking at expanding programming or anything like that, that we weren't getting into their scope of work, that we were pushing people to the work that they were doing, programs and services, et cetera. And we even helped them expand into Northern Alberta when the pandemic hit and they were able to go online and get more into the rural and remote communities rather than just being in the bigger centers. And so I think there's a huge opportunity to work collaboratively with organizations, both on the programming side as well as on the fundraising side. And so it has to be a win-win. I think you want to make sure that you don't feel like your staff or volunteers are taking on the brunt of the work, especially around a fundraising event or something like that, or a collaborative campaign. But they can be extremely successful, because I do think generally donors and members of the community want to see organizations that are collaborating rather than competing, especially when they have common goals and serve the same kind of clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such great advice and such like I love that mutually beneficial kind of piece that you touched on, because I think so often we get wrapped up in like, what does a partner want? What do they need? And we kind of lose sight of how it's going to help us accomplish our goals as well.
And
okay,
we're bringing to the table as well.
No, go ahead.
No, and what we're bringing to the table as well. Like, I think if you want to collaborate, you have to really take that time to talk as a team and to understand what you can bring to the table, what you can offer, not just what you're going to get out of the situation.
Yes, 100%. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left, so I think we have time for maybe 2 more. So we'll do one, and then we'll come back to that question that we kind of stuck a pin in earlier. So this one is from Laurel, who's on the call, and she's asking, would you recommend buying lists to build up your donor base and to elicit monthly donors? No.
No. I do not. Because it just immediately kind of pokes a hole in the whole idea of trust-based philanthropy. When people are all of a sudden receiving outreach from you and they don't know how you got their number or their email, or their address, there's just instantly this feeling, this kind of uneasy feeling and distrust that comes with that. And I will say, so before I was the CEO of Compassion House Foundation, I was a regional manager for Mad Canada. And I cannot express to you the headache that was dealing with people complaining about the like robocalls. People were getting the robocalls about making a donation, and the impact it had on my ability to do my job, but also even on our public reputation. So if you go, this sounds so bad to even say, but like if you look at the rating on like the Facebook account, there's a bunch of 1-star ratings and people complaining about getting the robocalls. So it impacts things like that, and it starts to just chip away at public trust. So I do not recommend buying lists. Unfortunately, yes, it means having to do the hard work up front, but it is worth doing it and creates trust long-term.
I would also say if you're looking in terms of where to invest your energy, like that might not even be the best list to invest your energy in, right? Like, especially as so many of you are commenting on how you have small teams and all of those kinds of things, and you're gonna have to use your time and resources wisely. So that might not be the best resource for you. Okay, we're back. So what would you say is a commonly overlooked or ignored fundraising tool or process that you believe all nonprofits should be using in 2023?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one that I would say, and where I found a lot of early success, especially around major gifts, is utilizing committees. Like, how are you using your volunteers, those who are already engaged in your cause, who care about it, who are giving personally, to open up their networks and help you with prospect research. So people are worried about like, how do we get these lists? How do we know who to reach out to? If you can tap 6 to 10 really solid current donors, board members, volunteers that you can tap into and develop a fundraising committee or a major gifts committee, and touch base with them once a month. Have lists ready to go. Ask them to add names to that list. Ask them to do a warm handoff. The success rate of being able to meet with a prospective donor when it's a peer of theirs or a friend who's reaching out and saying, hey, I have Michelle here from XYZ organization. I'm a big supporter of the work they're doing. This is why I care about it. And I would love for you to give her 30 minutes of your time so you can hear more about it as well. I'm telling you, I experienced this 100%. I've never had someone turn that down. And so that personalized outreach and handoff is so critically important. And so if there's anywhere that you can tap into, I would say that's probably the most important one. And a lot of organizations aren't, because it's like, oh, it's another meeting, it's another committee, it's more volunteers to manage. But when you get the right people around that table, it can absolutely change the trajectory of your organization.
Amazing. Yes. And I just want to address, we just had one question come in that I just want to address before we kind of close it up. But we had somebody ask if these conversations are applicable to the USA as well. And yes, absolutely. Like this, there's so much that it can be learned from each other, country to country. I know our examples are from Canada. We are located in Canada, but absolutely all of this is applicable to the US and beyond as well. So with that, that concludes the session for today. So thank you so much again to Michelle for bringing such amazing insights, and to Imagine Canada for co-presenting this webinar with us today. I think I can speak for all of us on the call when I say that was extremely insightful. I hope everybody feels empowered as they head into their 2023 fundraising year. Before we go, I just want to let everyone know that there will be a very short survey that will pop up right after this session. It will only take you about 20 seconds, and we would all greatly appreciate hearing your feedback. Our next Keelabs webinar is on how to leverage storytelling to advance your cause with John Mark Vanderpool from Social Impact Solutions. It's taking place on February 7th. Kim has, I believe, just put the link to register in the chat, so that I hope you can all come in and check that out. And that's kind of it for us. Thank you again. Thank you, Michelle. And we will see you all at the next Keelabs webinar.